there. I was missing you, actually.
I was missing you.
Yeah. So, what a debate, eh?
Incredible, yeah. And so fun to have so much engagement from you as well. I mean, so many questions, so many question marks, so much to explore.
Yeah, so much happening in the AI field. And you know, oftentimes we're so focused on Europe and Asia and America and AI, but there's a lot happening all over the globe in places that you might not normally associate with high tech, right?
That's exactly right. And this next panel is very exciting to me in particular, because we're focusing on the rising tech superhub in Africa.
Now that's really cool because, like I said before, you don't often think about it, but you know, sometimes in developing countries, people can leapfrog over technological innovation. So for example, in some countries, no one has landlines. They're never gonna get landlines. They're gonna skip right onto mobile phones. Or if you don't have electricity, they're gonna skip wired electricity and go straight to solar power.
That's exactly right. And sub-Saharan Africa in particular has already done that.
Yeah.
And here to help us explore that even further, let me introduce our first guest, the esteemed Ezeswesilli from the Africa Economic Development Policy Initiative. She is the former Nigerian Minister of Education and hashtag Bring Back Our Girls activist.
And we have Maryanne from TechBridge Invest and the University of Nairobi. And our moderator of the panel from TechCrunch Invest is Mike Butcher. So a round of applause for our panelists.
Okay. Hello, everybody. How are you? Have a seat. Having a good time? Are you alive? Hello? Hello? So, my name is Mike Butcher. I'm with TechCrunch. I'm editor-at-large with TechCrunch, based in London. And it is my absolute pleasure to do this panel with Ezeswesilli, who's with the Africa Economic Development Initiative, based out of, where are you based out of?
Abuja, Nigeria.
Okay, Nigeria, of course. And with Maryanne, who is with TechBridge Invest and the University of Nairobi. Round of applause for these people, please. Thank you. So I'm going to put this over here, which is all of your questions, which you'll obviously be hammering us with shortly. We're going to talk about Africa. So one of the big issues at the moment is this, huge interest in Africa at the moment, because it's. I think you were saying to me earlier, just before we came on stage, it's the youngest continent, isn't it? Why do you think that people in technology should be so fascinated and so interested in doing technology and startups and companies in Africa?
Because Africa is the frontier that remains to be conquered in terms of the capacity of the world to solve its own problems. And we now know that exponential technology essentially gives us better tools to solve problems. There is no reason why we should have the kind of pernicious poverty that still exists around us in the world when we can use technology to disrupt a lot of the challenges that we still have, whether it's in terms of food insecurity, agriculture, or it's in terms of human capital development, education, or health, or infrastructure. Today we're talking about smart cities. We're talking about a lot of things that technology can do for us across sectors. Africa is a good place to bring these new ideas. And one of the things we see analytically is that you can get 3 times the reward you get from investing in matured economies from Africa. So if you're someone who's really interested in not just being nice, you really want bottom line, and at the same time, a little bit of your heart goes toward doing something that's relevant and impactful.
You're developing
in a developing environment, then you shouldn't be wasting time anywhere else. Africa is the place to go.
There you go, right? That's the answer.
Yeah.
But Maryanne, now one of the things I think is interesting from your perspective is that Tech Bridge Invest is an initiative to bring the technology community together, especially in Nairobi and in Kenya. But you've also know for yourself, there's the data actually supports how fast Africa is developing in a technology sense as well.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could enlighten us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Africa is really the next frontier, and there is evidence to show this is true. If you look at the interest of late of VCs and international investors also from other parts of the world, like the States and Europe, looking at big companies and organizations and startups that have been successful in raising money, such as Jumia, such as Africa's Talking or Cellulant, right, which have raised millions of dollars, right, and are now, supported by a tech talent that is Africa-based. This is clear evidence that there is momentum. And of course, we also have the aspect that Africa does not have this baggage of old technology. So we have, of course, the concept of leapfrogging, where we kind of, essentially it means that you jump a stage, and move on to the next stage. And so right now.
Yeah. I mean, Nairobi and Kenya was a pioneer in mobile money with M-Pesa.
Yes.
Do you think that Kenya is capable now of leapfrogging again further?
Absolutely. And the place is primed for leapfrogging again. If you talk about right now, the access to communication has led to the access to the internet. And we have a young population, 45 million people in Kenya, most of them young people. And they are ready to innovate for their needs, right? And so you have companies such as Andela, for example, that comes in to hire talent in Kenya that is actually developing for the Western world, for example. It just shows that, there's evidence of the capability to develop. And I think that's what I'll say about that.
One of the issues, though, is that there's also a problem with, not a problem, but there are actually enormous amounts of talent in Africa, as we know, just like anywhere else, of course, but it's young, it's hungry, it's educated. Do you think that there's also outsourcing companies, and also Western companies launching their services in African countries?
Yeah.
What about the actual entrepreneurs on the ground from these countries? Do you think they're able to compete with often Western companies launching their own services?
Okay. I think the exposure can only spur on innovation.
Right.
Yeah. So when you have Google coming in to share their APIs and train young people to use their APIs, it can only have a positive effect of getting them started at a higher level. And so then they can contribute in a more relevant way to exactly what's happening and essentially catch up with the rest of the world if they need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I went to Lagos last year, Nigeria, with TechCrunch. We ran our own battlefield there, and it was Battlefield Africa, and people came from many countries around Africa, and the amount of talent and enthusiasm in the room was absolutely amazing. I was just completely blown away by it, actually. And it's you just got to go there and see it for yourself. It's incredible. The atmosphere is amazing. But I think one thing I also wanted to highlight, ladies and gentlemen, is that you are now sitting in the presence of a nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize. Obi here. Take that round of applause.
Thank you.
And as we know, you're a passionate political campaigner in your country. I believe that you've stood as a candidate as president of your country in the past. You're very heavily involved in politics, and we know that if you're a bit further back, you won't be able to see, but Obi is wearing a badge that says, "Bring back our girls now." Obviously, this is in reference to the terrible events, the kidnappings in the north of Nigeria by Boko Haram. And I know that you're passionate about employing technology to fix politics.
Indeed.
How do you want to do that?
So I have come to the conclusion that politics is too serious a matter to be left to politicians, and that citizens of countries should be now more invested in the quality of politics that happens in their countries. The corrupted nature of politics today is depriving citizens of good governance. We cannot afford to wait until corrupted people entrench themselves in office and then we start shouting. It is better to be upstream in redefining and reinventing politics. So I'm starting something known as fixpolitics.org. And the whole idea is to structurally change politics so that you could start from the very grassroots to get the kind of civic engagement of citizens in the nature of politics, making sure that political parties are representative of the kinds of values that citizens want to see ultimately in governance. So we're going to do that. And then we also are going to spend a lot of time developing unconventional training models that would produce the kinds of candidates that will run government and do governance for the greater good. I mean, I frankly think that there is absolutely no country where the citizens are clapping for their politicians.
No, I think I could, certainly in my own country, I don't think we're particularly happy with our politicians right now, I must admit.
So for me, my sense is that much in the same way as the tech community sits around thinking of how to solve existing problems or future problems that we don't even know we have, we can also sort of think of nation states from that perspective and say to ourselves, how do we use technology as a basis to inspire new ways of governance? And for me, I am looking to this assemblage of people on the basis of partnerships, that is collaboration, on the basis of knowledge that technology offers us even better, and all other kinds of resources that we need in order to even make an experiment of my country. Nigeria cannot afford to keep failing. Anyone who is interested in tackling the developmental challenge of Africa needs to be interested in how well Nigeria gets governed. And
so are you making a sort of a public announcement now to say, come and get involved,
yes,
fix these
please.
problems?
Yes, because we've got to fix it. I mean, think of it from the perspective that a lot of what we see as the migrations across the Mediterranean, we can actually create larger zones of economic prosperity by simply getting governance to work in a number of these countries.
Governance is, those of you familiar with the blockchain space, governance is a subject that comes up now often all the time, but that's obviously also a technical issue. But in terms of the startup scene, I think a lot of people, especially here, are very fascinated. I can see there's also some questions coming in on the Slido, Maryanne, about how do you get involved? I mean, Obi's made a very good point, like she wants technology entrepreneurs in the technology industry to get involved in these countries to help fix some of those problems. But what do you think is the best way to interface? I know that, for instance, you are a proponent of the innovation in your country. You're running an organization called the Incubation Hub. Is that kind of a great sort of landing point for people to get involved in your ecosystem?
Well, good question. And it is a mammoth of a task because essentially we're talking about perhaps doing what the governments are not doing.
Yeah.
And traditionally innovation or digital innovation in Africa has been to tackle inefficiencies and really has been around inefficiencies. Those have been the success stories. So I think we really are on the right track with digitization and just kind of encouraging young people to see a problem, innovate around it, and build a product, right? If we keep encouraging that, that kind of culture, supporting the infrastructure, supporting the ecosystems in terms of the accelerators, supporting the investors, of course, even the education system through academia, this can only put more pressure on the government to align themselves. It really is a reality. The government will not change for us. We must change, and they will then align themselves for us. That's my perspective.
I see.
Yeah.
But certainly, Africa being the youngest country on the planet in many ways.
Continent.
Sorry. Continent, I apologize. Continent, slip of the tongue. There's so much opportunity. Sometimes it's hard to know where to start. What would be your advice?
My advice would be education is really an entry point. It's an incredible entry point. As we move toward more visual economy, and we see that you can get educated sitting where you are and be part of a project team anywhere in the world, just providing some of these new skills that the economy, that the tech economy requires from wherever you are is key. And there's strong appetite for that. Many of the universities on the continent are not yet remodeled into this visual economy. And so those who have startups that are focused on building massive human talent, don't look too far. Look toward the continent of Africa, build collaborations with very prolific young techies that are, really growing exponentially on the continent. For example, Africa gave the world Andela. Africa gave the world Flutterwave. So we do have our own innovations that are big and startups. And when you think of M-Pesa, when I was vice president at the World Bank in Washington, D.C., I felt good as VP for Africa, bringing Michael Stevens from Kenya, M-Pesa, and having him go as an expert to Asia, to support some of the countries that were looking at mobile banking and knowing that it started off with the continent.
Yeah.
So if you really want a massive hub for innovation, for new ways of solving problems, you really want to be doing that with a lot of these really sound young minds. And by the way, you want to achieve diversity, you got to be coming to the continent. Because
Absolutely.
the women of Africa are fierce.
Yes, they are.
A combination, I think, which is extremely attractive to anyone, I think, who wants to get involved in a fast-moving and fascinating market. So I think we should show our round of applause by how excited we are about Africa, everyone. So thank you so much, Obi. Thank you, Maryanne. Thank you, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you to our esteemed panel. Congratulations. Nomination for the Nobel Prize. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike.